Seen the market evolve. You know, you've seen headlines around interesting companies like Quicken Loans and Palantir exploring the public market. So I think it'll be interesting. Companies are definitely looking to access the IPO.
I guess now, when you have been working on Slack's direct listing, we broke last night that Palantir is looking to do a direct listing. How do you do a direct listing in a market that's more volatile? Are there concerns about it?
You know, it's an interesting question. So
is the best place for them?
I want to bring us back to Palantir for a second, just because it will be another huge listing next week, and the direct listing model is so different. What is significant about next week?
So we have a number of direct listings coming to market, and we think it's exciting because it's a new pathway that we helped pioneer a few years ago. And so that's what you're going to see take place not only with Palantir, but with other companies in the near future.
So with Palantir, too, they're keeping so much of the voting rights among the founders, yet they're getting into public markets.
Names like Zoom Video, which was up about 1% on the day. Palantir, you had a lot of initiations come in today after that IPO. Those shares were up 5%. And of course, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Duncan, obviously that's an M&A play, but a pretty significant move higher there, up 16%.
And Caroline, how much of those stocks that Romain just mentioned are the work from home trade? You're thinking about a Zoom, you're thinking about an Amazon.
Investments in lots of things, technology companies. You've known many of them, Pinterest and Palantir and
on your turf, you have to be worried. Investors worried today. Palantir, investors not necessarily worried there. Remember, this was basically a public debut that really went nowhere. Remember, the shares fell its first day of trading and had been range bound for the most part up until about a week or two ago, and they've really broken out, rallying about 75% here over the past week and a half or so, up 12%, seeing some activity here from .72 Asset Management and Anchorage Capital out of those latest. Your biggest gainers on the day across the tape: Palantir, DraftKings, Tesla, story-specific stocks right now. To the downside, your biggest decliners right now: GoodRx, Walgreens, CVS Health, not necessarily story-specific, unless you want to call Amazon a big story.
There are some individual movers, though, that are really all across the board. Palantir is lower, almost 5%, after Citron announced that it was shorting the stock. Moderna is also rising because its competitor AstraZeneca has to look at perhaps doing another trade to clear up some of the.
Among investors, we discussed all these risks, but to see the moves in some of these names, I mean, Palantir, we can talk about that stock off 10% after its earnings. The pressure is really on here in this market.
Yeah, Miles, before I set up why you're seeing this sell-off, I'm just looking at the Yahoo Finance trending ticker page right now, and it is a sea of red from yesterday's close. I mean, you just mentioned Palantir, Tesla shares, including the pre-market move today, down about 10% in 10.
We want to focus in on some of these individual tech names that we're talking about. Let's bring up Palantir for a moment, shall we? Since Miles mentioned it, that company's overall revenue was up 49%, but the net loss was wider than estimated. Why? Higher compensation costs, which is really interesting given the trend that we've been seeing about more companies really on the sort of hourly wage side talking about having to pay out higher wages. Here's a company.
Nature of these things, but perhaps what's supporting Bitcoin a bit here is that Palantir in their earnings talked about the fact they're going to accept payment via Bitcoin. So I think as we get more of these applications of Bitcoin, companies using them, be it Tesla or now Palantir, that certainly does sort of lend this institutional credence to the cryptocurrency, Francine.
Yeah, it certainly does. Danny, thank you so much. I mean, I was looking at a tweet actually by Elon Musk yesterday. I mean, he talked up Doge once again. I'm getting probably a dog because of coin, but we're not buying into cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, exactly. I massive position in GameStop, but also Kathleen Woods. I mean, you have Tesla, you have Palantir. These are all retail favorites. And for a very long time, the retail crowd and investors alike just poured their money into ARK. Last year, about $1 billion of inflows into this ETF. But if you look at what's happened over the past couple months, about $500 million gets yanked out of there. So what we're seeing is not necessarily a turn in posture against ARK, but it really is a bifurcated market, Francine, of people who really like tech, who like these big cash-rich company, maybe are gold being one of them, up about 0.1%. Also really remarkable, Francine, Palantir, the tech company, the big data company, buying $51 million worth of gold, saying that they are preparing for a black swan event. So that gives you an idea of how some corporations and market participants are viewing the state of play right now, not to mention things like Afghanistan and geopolitical concerns as well. And we do have a VIX that is moving higher yet again, Francine, volatility about the highest in 2 weeks.
Danny, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And gold, I think, is interesting. You know, there's a great story overnight about Palantir. They bought apparently $50 million worth of gold bars. I always love the idea of these 100-ounce gold bars going for $178,000 a piece. And they're now willing to accept pay, not only in Bitcoin as well as dollars, but in gold for their software services. Yeah, exactly. So if you need some software action from Palantir, you can just get a gold bar and hand it over to them, and they'll deliver.
Perfect for the Miller Vault. Let's also look at
some names. Soaring Eagle Acquisition, the blank check company, Farfetch, the online retailer, Palantir, Pfizer, Semaphore are some. Too Simple Holdings, or Dave Wilson highlighted it a couple of weeks ago. These are names that you've been buying. Highlight a couple of them in your thinking.
I
know it's a lot.
Yes. Too Simple, which it was a SPAC, and it fell to earth, and we were able to get a very nice sized position, even in our flagship fund. Read some of the other ones.
Well, I think again, Palantir is one, and actually folks are emailing me and said, have Kathy talk about Palantir and her recent buy.
Sure. Palantir, we believe that Palantir has the opportunity to usurp a lot of AWS, Azure, Google Compute over time. It is pushing artificial intelligence out to the edge. And Palantir, because I think it's roughly 60% of its business has been with the government, much of that in intelligence agencies, Palantir is
of stocks moving in pre-market trading, let's take a look at some others. One of them being Palantir. It's a big mover to the upside, up about 9% in pre-market trading after winning an $823 million contract from the U.S. Army for data analytics services. To the downside, though, is GoGo. Of course, it operates in-flight Wi-Fi. It was downgraded at Morgan Stanley on increasing competition, and as a result, that stock is down 6% before the bell. And you also got a downgrade from Goldman Sachs for U.S. Steel. The analyst putting a $21 price target on that stock.
Dutch gas for the next delivery topped as much as 12%. One of the founders of Palantir Technologies has started a furious debate on Twitter about parental leave. Venture capitalist Joe Lonsdale tweeted that any prominent man who takes 6 months off with his newborn is, quote, a loser. His tweet came in response to one about U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who took time off to care for his child.
At least when it comes to the inflationary story.
Mike, we mentioned earlier, obviously, Tesla, also Palantir down quite a lot. Peloton had another down day, and PayPal another one. At that sort of ARK-ish type universe type stock, which was down pretty sharply overall. And ARK down 3%.
Yeah, between Tesla, PayPal, and Palantir, yeah, it was not a good one. You know, it's interesting because those types of stocks had their ultimate peak in January and February, and they had the big decline, bounced a couple of times since then. It's really been the jury's been out as to whether, in fact, that was a consequential peak in those types of big total addressable market, innovative company, no real path to near-term sustainable profitability. Now, PayPal.
But other executives saying in their words that this was a fantastic quarter. By the numbers, Q3 EPS in line, revenue did beat, Q4 revenue forecast also a beat. Revenue for the full year expected to be $1.53 billion, a jump of 40%. And Karp's company reaffirming that it does expect annual revenue growth of 30% or more through 2025. But RBC's Rishi Jaluria is saying a red flag to him in this report, decelerating growth on the government side, but also he says on the commercial side, if you back out the SPACs, he says, remember, Palantir has become a big investor in tech companies that are themselves getting ready to go public. Rishi rates Palantir's sector perform. Yes, differentiated technology. Yes, deep customer relationships. But Rishi also says there's a rich valuation on this one, and he does have concerns about long-term growth post-pandemic. On the other hand, Brent Till at Jefferies takes the other side of this trade. He says Palantir is a buy. Bottom line, he says expectations were high heading into this print. That explains some of this decline this morning. The key metric of financial health, Brent argues, is backlog growth for this software company, and that is accelerating.
This enables us to supercharge our business. With the backing we've now got from Microsoft and Palantir, we're already the market leader in the US. We intend to be market leader globally.
On a real-time look right now, are people moving around right now? What can you tell us?
Right now, I can see from less than a minute ago, 7% of vehicles moving around New York, 12% in Austin. We receive over 450,000 data points every second. So less than a minute, so we can see intersections, we can see traffic light changes.
You going to mention Boeing? I'm going to mention PayPal and Twitter and Snap and Chewy and Palantir and CRISPR and Virgin Galactic and Chegg.
Chegg's got hit a little, unless that was a 4-for-1 split.
A little. I mean,
Peloton.
What do you do with some of these
Peloton.
names? And DraftKings and Robinhood and Bumble and Roku and Beyond Meat. Go on and on.
Well,
these things are all off 40%
well,
from
they
their
were
highs.
part of an era.
And by the way, in a very recent period, let's call it the last 8 weeks.
Gus in Virginia. Gus.
Hey, Jimbo. I want to ask you about Palantir Technology.
Cold stock, cold stock, cold stock. The cold stocks aren't working, okay? I think it's got, I mean, I read the business, like, you can't even understand what they do because most of it's black box. We fooled around and we traded, but no, it's a cold stock right now. It's not working. Junior.
Derivative, but go downstream a little bit, and I'll say Palantir's been a very difficult stock to own, and over the last month, you've had a lot of analysts downgrade the stock, $19 price targets. It's trading there now, but they're just starting to see news that, they're talking about their crypto. They have a crypto security platform that I don't think the market fully comprehends, and they'll be at the forefront of that. And if, in fact, that is the case, which I think it will be, this stock should be significantly higher. So I get all the crypto plays. I think if you want to look downstream, look at Palantir.
All right, that's the stock side of things. Tim Seymour, anything on your radar with regard to the coins and tokens themselves or another derivative play on them?
Well, first of all, yeah, I'm going to say a couple things, and I'm going to extend Guy's reference to the police. I mean, crypto and blockchain right now are the spirits in the material world. And having the folks down on the Hill have these types of, sometimes they are clumsy.
Companies in AI and analytics come public over the last year or so. You've got Snowflake, UiPath, C3AI, Palantir, but it's been a bit of a roller coaster. I mean, we talked about this earlier, and we can show a chart how much they're off their peaks. Does that inform your investments, how much you value the companies, the startups in this space?
Yeah, look, what's happening in the public markets makes sense, right? It's, inflation is going.
Have on your list, sort of keeping an eye on. If it gets low enough, you might pick it up.
Well, I mean, look, I like Palantir. I own DraftKings. Karen talks about Zillow. I kind of agree with a lot of these. So these are stories that for different reasons got tweaked significantly higher. I just think that, we're going to have a fascinating conversation with Paul Sankey later on in the show. I mean, think a lot of these internet stocks and ones that are also related to security and software. I mean, look, Palantir is a real company. And I actually think Zillow is a real company. And we've talked about Zoom. And I just think this is absolutely 2.0. If you look at and .com crash 2.0, if you look at, you could put together a basket of stocks that were some of the high flyers that are down anywhere from 65 to 80% off their 52-week highs. And it's a function of, first of all, those valuations never made sense. It's also a function of where we've seen.
The top 5 most mentioned tickers on Wall Street bets in 2021, they were GameStop, AMC, Tesla, BlackBerry, and Palantir. Those names alone brought up more than 900,000 times. But when you look at all the memes and the emojis and the diamond hands talk, it just didn't always mean that the stock went to the moon. You look at AMC, like I said, about a 1,000% gain. But Palantir, Tesla, and BlackBerry, all of them underperforming the S&P 500 over that same time, despite a ton of interest by retail traders and a lot of talk on Wall Street.
You made 50 Teslas or Shopify's or Blocks, the former Square, Coinbase or Zoom, Roblox or Shopify or Twilio or Palantir, things you have.
Right now to discuss that and so much more is Joe Lonsdale, managing partner at 8VC and co-founder of Palantir. Joe, it's great to see you this morning. Let's just speak to the valuation issue. I know you live in the private markets, but the private markets oftentimes key off the public markets, and there is a downdraft taking place in the public markets around tech.
I'm living more in the public markets as well these days. You know, when you've been doing this for a while, these companies go out, and yeah, it's amazing. I think 40%.
To stay afloat, which they did, diluting the heck out of every owner. I saw them buy Palantir in an almost mystical fashion, betting that it was somehow the best cyber warfare stock, even though it isn't. Of course, they love the $10 SPACs. Like, you can only lose $10. It hurts to lose $10. And, of course, a year ago this week, they piled into two companies, not because they liked the businesses. Oh, no, not at all, actually. But because they believed they could crush the short sellers. I'm talking about AMC and GameStop. Now,
And that's because Palantir Technologies is out with quarterly results this morning. The software platform company reported adjusted quarterly profit of 2 cents per share. That compares to a consensus estimate of 4 cents. So you're going to be seeing that stock already off about 3% this morning. Revenue did beat Wall Street forecasts. We're going to keep our eye on it. As we're speaking, literally, it's now off 5% off of this miss. So we're going to keep watching this. This, of course, has been one of the more heavily bought stocks by some in the retail community who've been watching it as well. A high flyer we've been talking about for quite some time, and you're looking at that literally in real time come down. We're off close to now.
Roger, great to have you with us.
Hey, how are you?
It sounds like you think the market's just not sort of getting Palantir, since Palantir is actually exhibiting growth compared to some of its peers, which are completely unprofitable. What exactly aren't they getting? And maybe it's just the market environment. The market environment is not a good one for stocks of this ilk.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's an extremely tough tape right now. I mean, the market does not like uncertainty, and you have three very key things that are extremely uncertain. Invested in the market for the last 20 years, we've seen this time and time again. I think to shift gears to Palantir, with no visibility and no profitability, you know what? You won't come back. But we don't think Palantir is one of those companies. We think that's a key differentiator here in this situation.
They did beat on a lot of metrics, but they did miss on adjusted EPS. So let's be clear. There's a reason for investors to be upset in terms of them meeting estimates here. Roger, I'm curious because you've been a long-time investor. When we say long-time investor, it predates its IPO. You've been an investor since 2014. And so I'm wondering how being
more to solve tough problems. And we're in the camp that they're going to need Palantir software. And we think it's a game changer going forward. So yes, is my cost basis super low? Absolutely. Did I sell any shares personally since the company has come public? And since I've invested? No, I haven't sold one share personally. So I'm fully committed to the story. And
big losses and stay with the program. Josh, I got Palantir, sold about 5 million shares of Palantir. That's after loading up on it in recent months, and that's with an earnings report and a stock that's gotten absolutely obliterated. There it is, 63% off of its high. That's on Roku, which is in the Innovation Fund. She defended it yesterday. That's a stock that's well off of its high. Look at that, 77.5%. That takes us to DraftKings, which is another stock that's absolutely getting hammered today. You take all three of those in context of the greater.
And that's a Cathie Wood stock, so I have something positive to say. I'm not just negative. I'm not a negativist, but Palantir. Whoa! Palantir.
She did sell more Palantir. That's the one thing she did not buy yesterday.
Yeah, she got that wrong.
All right, all of which leaves me wondering, so what do I do? Do I start nibbling at some of this stuff that looks cheaper now because of the significant fall in stock prices? You do. Even with the prospect of rising rates, 7 rate hikes, as Solomon told you, 25 basis points, a shrinking balance sheet at the Fed, I still want to nibble here. Because what? Well, because I mean, what's a normalized PE for these companies?
Tyler, great to have you with us. You got a sell rating on Palantir, so it's clear where you stand on this. And in your most recent note, you say if you back out some of these SPAC contributions, commercial growth would be much, much weaker. This whole thing doesn't sound good. It sounds like they're making investments in SPACs in return for contracts. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's a number of these contracts out there where Palantir is invested often in, pre-revenue companies that are, going public via the SPAC route. And in those contracts, it has provisions where those customers or those companies turn around and use those proceeds to buy Palantir software. So there's a very clear line here. And in fact, Palantir discloses the amount of revenue from those SPAC companies, so investors can do the math. But I think the key point is it is a big growth driver for them in the commercial business. And I think our concern is just that that's a lower quality growth driver as investors evaluate the performance of the company.
Just to play the other side of it, I mean, what is the risk to this strategy? I mean, you say it's lower quality growth. I mean, it's lower quality, I guess, because it's not, they're not customers who actively want Palantir services, but they're customers who are sort of, I don't want to say coerced, but almost like a quid pro quo going on here. What's the downside here? Why not? There's nothing wrong. They're disclosing everything. It's revenue. What's wrong with it?
Right. Well, I think the concern is if you become dependent on the SPAC market, which clearly market conditions where we're at now, there's not as many new SPACs as there were over the last.
Tyler, this time last year, I think Palantir got caught up in the whole WSB Reddit crowd. It was a $45 stock. It looked like the sky was the limit. Probably the worst thing that happened to him. I was on that bandwagon incorrectly. But is there an argument to be made, obviously too reliant upon the government, if they could figure out sort of mid-sized business, sort of a downscaled offering to those businesses?
Yeah, I think that's an area to watch for sure. I mean, I think our concern has been it's been a business that has, very high exposure to the government, 50-60% of revenue. There's very few software companies out there that have that type of exposure. And, this is a business that's been around for a while, despite the recent public listing. And, they count only a little over 100 customers. And so, our view is that a lot of customers have looked at the Palantir technology and passed on it. It doesn't mean that they won't ever revisit it. But I think if you really dig down and deep and understand what Palantir is, it really isn't true out of the box software. It's really kind of packaged custom software that's being deployed by Palantir's engineers. And so I think that type of motion, very successful for the government. I think we're optimistic that Palantir can continue to grow in the government. But in the enterprise, that's just not the way that software has historically worked. And so, we're keeping an eye on the total customer number, but the fact that number is kind of being polluted by these SPAC deals, we just haven't really seen any signs that they're turning the corner. But I think it's definitely something to watch.
Get us anywhere, but I find it a very sad time. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, I'm looking at Palantir, and from their financials, it looks like they have a strategy of investing in startups that will buy Palantir's products. My question is this a sustainable growth model or a potential red flag?
I really despise their conference call. I thought they were very glib. They did talk about churning some civilian, you're getting a lot of civilian business, which is what they want. But, I mean, how can you...
Technology, which I think as a concept has become more popularized, at least among Wall Street, by Palantir and the like. You just struck this partnership with L3. How does the firm factor into this strategy?
So we're, like you said, Morgan, we're a brand new venture fund focused on supporting entrepreneurs at the intersection of national security and commercial technology. And as we thought about how do we best support these young companies and founders, we knew we needed a partner that could help accelerate and, the go-to-market for them when they think about the defense world.
If that's the case, then when are they can't raise any money. No one can raise money. So Palantir is a good example. Dramatic slowing, dramatic decline in their cash flow. They have enough, but why is 8 the right level?
Yeah, Palantir is interesting. They reiterated their call for continued revenue gain, but their operating margin is going to go from 30 year on year to maybe 20 in the current quarter?
Oh, no, that's just, it's I don't want to call it a disaster but revenue growth 16% from government, that's the slowest. Last year they did they have adjusted free cash flow of only $30 million. They're doing so poorly in terms of the.
Let's dig deeper into tech here. Shares of Palantir dropping over 20% to an all-time low after an earnings miss. A host of other software stocks all hitting new 52-week lows. DocuSign, Snowflake, Zoom, Salesforce, just to name a few. Let's bring in Tyler Radke, the co-head of Citi's U.S. Software Equity Research. Tyler, great to have you with us.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
I'm wondering, across your coverage universe, what has the multiple collapse been like? And do you...
There's still some good opportunities.
I want to ask you specifically about Palantir. Guy Adami watches this one very closely because it's one of the names that he thought you should buy at the start of the year here. The guidance was disappointing. Some other analysts on the street say the second half could look better because you got some tailwinds like the U.S. budget getting finalized and war. That helps Palantir. But where do you stand on this? And more specifically, in apps pretty much across the board, should we think that revenue is in jeopardy?
Yeah, so we've been cautious on Palantir for really the last year, just our concerns that it benefited from the pandemic. Growth was slowing, and they were doing some unusual things, such as investing in SPAC companies to derive revenue growth. And we were just concerned that would ultimately come back to hurt them. And I think that's what you're seeing with this quarter. The second quarter guide missed expectations, was below the street. Yeah, thank you.
Guy, I think I was channeling 2021. Palantir was your hope trade, and now we're on to the dawn trade. So you actually dropped it. But how are you feeling about the space overall? And Tyler had mentioned Snowflake, if you have a multi-year time horizon.
Yeah, it actually makes it worse, though, because, I love Palantir at 25, 21. I can give you the numbers, and it's trading, what, $7.50 now? So, among the myriad of things I've been wrong about, that's on the top of the list. And maybe some of these, listen, they've been cautious on it, obviously justified. I'll say this.
One other corporate question, because you made a comment about this last quarter, which is how you deal as a company with the IT sides of corporations and procurement.
More of a real issue.
And I'm actually curious about that and what the lesson of that experience was.
Yes, we are perhaps a little too used to being unpopular. And sometimes kind of enjoy it. And so that unpopularity plays out in interactions with internal structures. And over the last 20 years, we've fought with a lot of IT people. By the way, sometimes correctly. Operation Warp Speed, we fought with people on the inside of the White House to get it done. We got it done. You see all these places we fought. A lot of the things that made your life better, we fought with an IT thing. But we get a little too used to fighting with them, and they fight back. So now we're trying to have a more peaceful, friendly approach, and we're developing new efforts, and it seems to be working, not perfectly. And that is a legitimate criticism of Palantir. But by the way, that legitimate criticism only exists because the IT people correctly understand the power of our product, and it is threatening. Maybe your analyst friend should go talk to some of the IT people who don't like us.
Alex Karp, thank you.
Take care.
Boy, someone who knows Elon Musk very well. Joe Lonsdale is a founding partner of 8VC and a co-founder of Palantir. Joe, it's great to see you this morning. We're trying to make sense of actually what's going on in Texas, what's going on with this deal.
Time for today's MVP, most valuable pick. And today it's software company Palantir. The stock closing 6% higher today after Bank of America initiated coverage of the stock with a buy rating. Joining me now is Ron Epstein. He's senior aerospace and defense analyst at Bank of America Global Research. It was his call. Ron, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Mike.
Tell us the thesis behind this. It seems like kind of an opportunistic call. Obviously, the stock down a lot from its highs, some 70% even after today's move. But what are the key, I guess?
Yeah, so when you think about what's going on in the market, we've been very bullish on defense. If you look at where the defense budget's going to come in this year, it's going to come in probably $850 billion, and we think it's going to be close to $1 trillion when you get to 2026. And we've seen the defense stocks, the big defense names reflect that, but it hasn't been, that revaluation in defense has not been reflected in Palantir. And Palantir is a great way to get at it. If you look at Palantir, about 2/3 of their revenue is government, about half of that is national security. That's about 1/3 commercial. So when we see the defense budget have that kind of growth, this is a way to get at it. And I think broadly the way to think about it, data is the new bullets, right? And these guys are all about artificial intelligence, data organization, and how to see trends and bigger pictures in the data. And from all the companies we talk to, they're working their way into more and more customers in the national security space. And think about it as sort of Palantir inside, the Palantir data operating system, living in a lot of other systems that are fabricated or are put together by a lot of the other companies we cover. So we think this is a really nice way to get at an increase in national security spending.
Tells me that all of these stocks probably should rally if the market rallies, but I would think that Palantir is going to be dealing with major headwinds going forward for their business strategies.
All right, Steve, you did it. 3 buys and a bail from this IPO bunch. We really appreciate it. It's great to
building enterprise software and doing AI on top of that. I think a lot of companies like C3 AI, Palantir are going in that direction.
Palantir out with their quarterly numbers. Let's find out how the numbers came in. Frank Collin joining us now with that. Frank, good morning.
Hey, good morning to you, Brian. Palantir shares down double digits after a beat on the top line and a miss on EPS. The big data analytics company reporting a loss of 1 cent. The street looking for a profit of 3 cents. Forward guidance also a bit soft. Now, Palantir, of course, is known for government work, but growth outside of government contracts in the U.S. really the highlight of this quarter. Take a look. Overall revenue grew by 26%, while its U.S. revenue grew by 45%. U.S. commercial revenue, that's companies outside the government space, that grew more than doubled, and that's now about 20% of overall revenue. U.S. commercial customer count growing by 250% from 34 same quarter in 2021 to 119 this quarter. I spoke to the CFO, who says major disruptions from supply chain to COVID are really a catalyst for that growth. CEO Alex Karp saying in the shareholder letter that was released with earnings, after working with Sanofi, Merck, the CDC, and many others, he sees, quote, substantial opportunities for Palantir as a healthcare technology company, driving transformation across major pharmaceutical companies, biotechnology companies, insurers, providers, regulatory agencies, and research organizations. But government work is still about 80% of overall revenue. Palantir CFO said geopolitical tension from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visiting Taiwan to, of course, the Ukraine war is a tailwind for Palantir. Shares far outperforming the market and even defense stocks since June 2nd when CEO Alex Karp visited Ukraine. Karp has been very vocal about being both pro-West and refusing to work with China. However, Palantir did also issue soft guidance for the current quarter and the full year. The CFO said that's due to the quote-unquote lumpiness of government work that makes revenue forecasting somewhat difficult. But they do believe they have a strong pipeline.
Craig, welcome. Let's start with NVIDIA. Much in the news today. We talked fundamentals. What do the charts say? What's the trade?
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me back.
You bet.
Despite today's 8% drop, there's really not been much technical damage that's been done on NVIDIA. And from our perspective, if you look at the RSI, still is bullish at this point in time. There's good downside support around the 170 level. I can see upside back to the 196 level. And that really sets up a really positive, about 30% upside, 10% downside from where we're at. And yeah, Tyler, talking about the fundamentals, the top semiconductor analyst, Harsh Kumar, who happens to be here at Piper, he's still got an overweight on it, 235, and he thinks that the fundamental story is not broken. So we've got, Tyler, a stars and moon alignment here on NVIDIA, and it should be bought.
All right, stars and the moon in alignment.
I'm guessing Palantir might be a different story, Craig. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think, after having an 80% drop in here, the shares have kindly started to find a bottom in here. Today's pullback's not really disrupting a lot from a technical perspective, but from our perspective, we'd be a buyer on the pullback, but we got a little bit more downside to go, around 940 to get back to the 50-day moving average. Kelly, I just note that any sort of weakness in the dollar would also be a big positive for Palantir, with about 40% of their business comes from outside the United States.
European businesses. I mean, just in the last week, you've had MongoDB, Okta, AI, Palantir, UiPath, all either missing, guiding down, or both. And so, the forward prospects for growth in a number of these sectors are not good. The same is true in a lot of pockets of semiconductors. Yeah, a lot of these companies have taken very significant pricing because of all the shortages that have taken place, given the impacts of the pandemic, and are at peak margins.
Hertz and Palantir announcing a new partnership today. The car rental company will utilize Palantir's Foundry software to help manage its 500,000 car fleet. Joining us now, Palantir CEO Alex Karp and Hertz CEO Stephen Scherr. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining me. Stephen, you've been making a lot of deals since you've been CEO. A month ago, we had you on with Mary Barra and GM, and now with Palantir. What will this do for you?
Well, part of our success will be the partners that we keep, and we're super happy to keep Palantir as a partner. What this will do for us is we're a business that sits on an enormous amount of data, both about our cars, about our customers, and the like. And positioning those cars and managing those cars to their highest efficiency obviously brings, positive outcomes for the company and for our customers. Palantir and their Foundry platform enables us to take very different forms of data, whether it's data about our vehicles, data about the weather, data about airline schedules, take all of that, combine them in a way where we're not compelled to put them in a common form, and they give us output on which we can manage the company better.
Alex, it's good to have you on the show, and really interesting to learn about all the different ways that your software is being put to work.
Yeah, because you said we still like oil and energy in general. Also, you had Palantir on there. You like government contracts, biotech, some. You mentioned Teva Pharma. Any other final thoughts? I don't want, I think the reason why I pack my questions, and I'm sorry for that, I didn't mean to overload you, is because you do have a lot of great, thoughts on different areas. You said you like some staples and you're watching the consumer, but if you feel to comment on any of the staples or the consumer or Palantir or Teva.
Well, what I'm really trying to focus on, besides the consumer spending habits and how they may change going into next year, is also I'm looking at where the government is contracting with companies to spend money, because they have been spending money on things like EVs and infrastructure. And big data, which is a contract they made with Palantir. So we've been in Palantir for a while. It's not exactly wowing anybody, and it hasn't reported earnings yet. But I'm starting to think about what has really been undervalued that could actually grow. Now, Teva is an Israeli company, so I would wait for the earnings on that. That's coming out soon. But believe it or not, you know what I've added to my list, and I don't think I sent this to you, was I'm back looking at 3D systems, because it's another technology that has gotten so beaten up.
On Monday, a quiet day on the economic calendar, but we will get results from Palantir, Lyft, and gaming giants Activision Blizzard and Take-Two Interactive. And of course, the big event on Tuesday, the midterm elections. All
right, my pick today is Palantir. It's a top trending ticker on Yahoo Finance. Shares sinking, now off just around 11% after the company warned that it expects to miss its 30% revenue growth target this year, raising questions about Palantir's ability to expand beyond its core government base. Now, today's drop is the biggest decline that we've seen in just about 3 months. Analysts are bracing for more challenges ahead. Citi seeing further downside, writing in a note today that Palantir trades at a premium to peers. They also expect fast decelerating growth and continued uncertainty in government inflection into next year. So, Jared, when you're looking at losses today, clearly the street pretty worried about the results that we just got.
Yes, and on a technical basis, it looks like it's testing those lows for me. I'm looking at it on the Wi-Fi Interactive, but when you come down really hard against a level, not necessarily thinking that it will hold. Here's a max chart that was year to date, and you can see well below the initial price offering that it had way back.
Don't be the bottom feeder. I know there was a couple other stocks you were talking about, like Palantir and stuff like that. I mean, forget the bottom feeding. The market's telling you those stocks are in trouble. Don't try to be the hero on those. Go with the ones where the market's pushing them higher in an overall volatile, still somewhat weak market.
Okay. Now let's flip to the other side here. So Norwegian, BioNTech, you like for upside. Also very news flow relevant here today, accelerating some of these moves. Palantir and Activision to the downside. We got Activision after the bell this afternoon. You looking for some more weakness here? Or does Microsoft need to totally bail from that?
Decide to be bearish and or maybe modestly bullish on the stock.
Okay. Palantir today got smoked. Still room to trade this lower?
No. Oh, traded lower? Yeah. Again, trying to bottom feed a stock. The market's telling you clearly it doesn't like whatever the prospects are for this particular company. Again, below 766, which is a pretty big level. Till we go back above there, shorting rally seems okay. The one thing a lot of traders and investors constantly think about, it's like, oh, I already missed the trend.
Small cap tech companies have gotten completely beaten up. Things like Palantir or any other of the mid cap companies are down, 60, 70, 80%. It's not a bad starting point. But I think the big change for us has been our belief that fixed income is now finally becoming attractive. Because rates started out the year, the 1-year Treasury bond was below 1%. I just looked before we came on today that rate is now at 4.7%.